Hello to the Fast Angel community and everyone watching online. I'm Becky Crean, Director of Clinical Development at Ionis Pharmaceuticals, and on behalf of myself and the rest of the Ionis team, we'd like to thank you for listening today and taking time out of your busy lives to hear about our program. These are really difficult times, and I'm sure your families have had to make significant adjustments in trying to navigate life right now, and it makes what we're trying to do and develop a treatment for Angelman syndrome all the more important, and to do so with the utmost urgency. So we appreciate your time today. First, I want to thank the FAST Foundation for inviting us to be here. And we're thrilled to be talking with you today about our program and the advances we've made since we spoke with you last year. And during the presentation, I'll introduce you to Ionis and our experience with developing ASOs. I'll give you a brief review of what we've accomplished so far in the program and where we are today. And then I'll give you an update on our clinical trial treatment study, when it might start, and describe some of the details of the study. So there's a large group of researchers that are dedicated to our Angelman program at Ionis, and you may have met some of them before or heard them give presentations at this conference in the past. But these are just a few of the core team members that have been working on this program for many years. I'm Becky Crean, Project Team Lead for the Angelman Program. There's Frank Bennett, our Chief Scientific Officer and Neurology Franchise Head. We have Eugene Schneider, who's our Senior Vice President and Head of Clinical Development. We have Christina Bauer, who's Vice President of Patient-Centric Drug Development. We have Matt Buck, who's Vice President of our Regulatory Department. We have Frank Rigo, Vice President of Functional Genomics. We have Payman Jafarnejad, who's Director of Neurology Research. Now there's a lot more on our team, but too many to show here with pictures, but they're all actively working as we speak on helping us get a treatment to the Angelman community. So many of you may be familiar with the company, but I realize there may be new people attending the conference. It's virtual this year and accessible across the globe. So I'll spend just a few minutes introducing you to Ionis and then speak specifically to our Angelman program. So as background, we were founded in 1989, 30 years ago, and we wanted to turn antisense oligonucleotides, or ASOs, into a therapy. And since the discovery of ASOs, 100% of our focus has been on developing and advancing this technology. We're committed to this technology in a way that might seem stubborn, really, to some. A lot of other companies have tried it and said it would never work. It's now working. We've had some great success along the way, and now more companies are coming in with similar technology. Ionis, though, is the first company to really apply the technology and to treat diseases in a large number of therapeutic areas, and one of the first to apply it to neurological disease. We developed Spinraza to treat spinal muscular atrophy, and also Tegsedi to treat polyneuropathy. We have a pipeline full of ASOs in development and many in the clinic for the treatment of a variety of neurological diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, Angelman syndrome, and a variety of others. We have about 500 employees, and maybe half of those are in research. And then we have a large core research group that doesn't work on any particular disease. They only work on understanding the mechanism of ASOs, how to deliver them, how to make them better. The other half of the company works on disease-specific research, both in preclinical and clinical research. And the vision was to be a leader in the biotech industry in developing ASOs to treat a range of disorders, and we continue to be laser focused on that mission. So the companies maintain this focus on innovation and science in developing the ASO drug development platform. So over the last 30 years, we've been expanding the scope of our technology. We've continued to invest in the antisense technology. That's our sole focus. It remains our sole focus. And the goal of all of our programs is to create better drugs with a better profile that are safe and effective, but also to create patient convenience. We're very focused on patients during the entire drug development process, and we remain dedicated to developing partnerships with patients. These are important partnerships for Ionis, and our goal is to present opportunities to interact with the patients and the community all along the way. Now, I mentioned Spinraza for spinal muscular atrophy because it does have some similarities with what we're trying to do with Angelman syndrome. Spinraza is a life-changing medicine to treat SMA, and it was discovered at Ionis and partnered with Biogen to bring the drug to families with SMA. And it's important to note that Ionis and Biogen are working very closely together on developing the treatment for Angelman as well. So that was a little bit about Ionis and what we do. And now let's talk about Angelman syndrome. And for this audience, I really don't need to introduce Angelman syndrome or the molecular mechanics, but I thought I'd talk about it as a way to introduce you to how our drugs work. And as you know, Angelman syndrome is due to a deletion or a mutation of the maternal copy of UBE3A. And why this matters is because the paternal copy is silenced in neurons in the brain by this long non-coding antisense transcript you see here. And if you have a mutation or a deletion of UBE3A in the mother's copy, you no longer produce UBE3A in the brain. So our approach using ASOs is designed to bind to that long non-coding antisense transcript that silences the paternal copy. And the ASO unsilences this transcript and thereby increasing UBE3A protein production in the brain. So we started working on Angelman syndrome around 2012 with Dr. Art Baudet, who you know here in the audience. Through a number of years, the teams were able to validate that the ASO approach could indeed unsilence this transcript and reverse some of the aspects of the disease in animal models. And since then, we've been leveraging our 30 years of experience in this antisense technology and advancing our Angelman program. We started with an extensive screening process, screening over 3,000 ASOs, and from there, we identified several leads. Now, those leads have gone through a number of preclinical studies. We've done mouse studies, cell-cultured studies, and ultimately, we move into non-human primate studies. So our due diligence in selecting a candidate for clinical development is a very methodical process that's rooted in our 30 years of experience and success in developing these ASOs. Each of these studies tests potential compounds for safety first, making sure the drug is hitting the correct target and not other areas. We then test for potency and select out the most potent ASOs. And then we go back and we do more safety studies as we narrow down the selection process. So each process along the way helps us select out candidates that are safest, most effective, and potent that we want to continue advancing. So even as we sit here today virtually, and most of Ionis is working virtually right now, progress continues to be made in the program. Our research studies continue, and we remain 100% committed to delivering an ASO to the Angelman community. So where are we today with the program? I think most of you are aware that we announced last December that we were planning on initiating a clinical trial with our lead this year. And as we mentioned at the time, there were still ongoing testing when we made that announcement. And through the testing, we identified a new lead that we think has a better profile than the original drug. And we're now completing the remaining preclinical studies with this compound. And if all goes as planned, we anticipate starting a clinical trial in the second half of 2021. Our goal at both Ionis and Biogen is to bring the best drug forward. It's worth re-emphasizing that Ionis and Biogen are 100% committed to bringing the best drug forward to this community. And because next year is not that far away, we've started initiating important study startup activities such as country and site selection for the first trial. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. One aspect of ours and any drug program really is to make sure we have the tools to adequately measure how people respond to the drug. And so to do that, we've partnered with Roche and Biogen in 2 natural history studies that you've heard about here. One is to identify home measures that can be used in a trial. And the other is to collect cerebrospinal fluid or CSF samples in individuals with Angelman syndrome. This study is currently enrolling, and Biogen will share the details with you of that trial. So our goal at Ionis is to bring the best drug forward. We want to emphasize that we believe we have a compound with the best risk-benefit profile that will treat the broadest population in Angelman syndrome. And again, I can't emphasize enough, we're 100% committed to bringing this drug forward to the Angelman community. So I'm going to turn our attention now to a part of our drug development process at Ionis that doesn't get talked about much, but it's very central to our approach to bringing new therapies to patient, and that's the patient perspective. This isn't a new concept to drug development, and you're probably familiar with the concept. FDA has also adopted this and has provided some guidance for drug companies on the importance of including the patient experience and what that means. I mentioned before that at Ionis, we collaborate with patient communities all along the way in order to bring and develop the best drugs we can for treatment. And so getting the patient and the family perspective on living with the disease does two things. First, it helps us identify what aspects of the disease are most relevant and impactful to the patients and families. And second, what aspects of the disease should be the focus of a new therapy. And engaging with patient and families from the beginning of the drug development process is critical to learning about what's most important to you, to the patients, and to the families. And this in turn helps us identify the most appropriate design of a clinical trial, as well as how best to measure what's most important to you. And sometimes this means developing new methods to be able to capture that. So there's been a couple of important surveys and studies that have been done with the help of the Angelman community to understand your perspective and experience. You've heard about them here in these conferences before, but two of them have been published on the caregiver perspective. And those have identified what's most important for families to see in a treatment. And then we know that it doesn't always line up with what drug companies or clinicians think is most important. And sometimes caregivers may identify certain aspects of the disease that may be really challenging, but there may be other aspects that are more important to them for a treatment. So for example, these two surveys found that Angelman caregivers think problem behaviors are very challenging, but it's not necessarily a high priority for treatment. And conversely, they don't identify cognitive abilities of their children as challenging for them, yet this is a very important in terms of a treatment. So understanding the needs and priorities for the patients and their families is incredibly important to the drug development process. And Ionis takes this perspective very seriously and incorporates it not only into the drug selection process, but also in how we test the drug in the clinic. So how are we doing that specifically in our Angelman syndrome trial? Well, we'll use a three-pronged approach to assess all aspects of the disorder that you've told us are important in a treatment, things such as communication, seizures, cognitive abilities, sleep difficulties, and we'll use measures that directly assess your child. We'll get the clinician's perspective, and we'll also get your perspective during the trial. We'll also try as best we can to ease the burden of participating in a trial. And we understand it's a big commitment and requires time and travel and some inconvenience for you and your family to be a part of a trial. It's a big decision. Our trial will try to have as few in-clinic visits as possible, and we'll focus on assessments that you can do at home. So it's not so intensive in the clinic. We'll have a service that'll handle all the travel and overnight stays, and there won't be any financial cost to you to participate. We also know that clinic visits aren't always reflective of how your child is doing at home, so we're going to incorporate a home video technique that will capture typical daily life and activities, and will track meaningful change in your child over the course of the trial. And so these are just a few of the ways we'll include your perspective and what's important to you in our drug development process so that we develop a treatment that's meaningful and important to you. And while we're still finalizing the details of our clinical trial, I can share with you more about what we do know about the trial. As I mentioned earlier, we anticipate starting roughly in the second half of next year. It'll be a global study with sites not only in the US, but all around the world. And as I mentioned before, the ASO will be administered with a lumbar puncture, and your kids will be given anesthesia to make them sleep during the short time it takes to give the drug. We haven't determined how long the study will last, but we know that each patient will receive several doses of the ASO over some period of time, and that everyone will receive drug. There won't be a placebo in this trial. Now, the exact timing of the drug administration hasn't been determined yet either, but we think the drug will be administered once every month, once every 2 months, hopefully longer. Those details will be worked out in the near future. We'll enroll a broad age range in our first trial, but different age groups may be staggered and enter the study at different times. During the trial, you'll also be given tests to measure things like that we know are most important to you, like the things I just mentioned, talking, walking, sleeping. Some of these tests will be done in the clinic, some will be done at home. Our primary goal in this first study is to assess the safety of the drug and to make sure it can be tolerated. I will also mention that, as Roche and Biogen have talked about in detail before, if you participate in one of those natural history studies that we're all collaborating on, you'll be given a priority voucher, which you can use for any one of our drug trials, including this one. And I know you are all taking advantage of that now as well. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about how we deliver ASOs and how we will be delivered in our Angelman trial. ASOs don't cross the blood-brain barrier like small molecule drugs, like a pill you take by mouth. That means we have to deliver them into the cerebral spinal fluid by a lumbar puncture so that they can move up through the spinal canal and get to the brain. Now, I know many people have questions about this and how it's done, and people have concerns about it and how safe they are. And so many of your children have probably gotten them before in the past when they were given anesthesia for another procedure, like for dental work. It's the same method. And because we've been delivering ASOs for over 30 years, we have a tremendous amount of experience with this method. So this is how we deliver all of our ASOs, and we've done it in over 11,000 patients, not only in adults, but teenagers, children, even newborn babies. Lumbar punctures are very common and safe procedures. There are some risks of side effects, as with all procedures and drugs, and the most common ones with having a lumbar puncture in particular are typically things like getting a headache afterwards, a backache. Some people experience nausea, vomiting, some dizziness. You can also have some effects at the site where the injection is made, like an infection where the needle was inserted, or even tingling or pain down your legs. And these types of side effects from an LP typically happen. They're not terribly common, but they happen in about 10% of in the people who get LPs, and they can be managed either in the clinic or at home. But as I mentioned, not only do we have a tremendous safety database for Spinraza in SMA, but we also have experience and safety data for other neurological disorders like ALS, Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and this wealth of experience is also guiding our Angelman program. So we feel very confident that when we start our trial next year, we'll do so with a drug that has a very good safety profile and will provide treatment to the broadest population in Angelman syndrome. So I mentioned our experience in a large and diverse neurology pipeline, and Angelman is very much a part of that experience. So as we near our clinical trial in 2021, we bring with it our 30-year history and experience in developing ASOs with a validated platform that allows us to precisely understand how our drugs work, how effective they are, ensuring that they're safe, and are set up to be successful in the patient communities. Our company is 100% invested in this technology, and we continue making investments and advances that lead to greater efficacy of our drugs, more convenient dosing schedules, and we're expanding the ways in which we deliver our ASOs to the brain. This is our commitment and continues to be. So what can you do today to prepare for tomorrow? So a couple of things. Consider participating in the ongoing natural history studies. Continue to be active and involved in the community. You can also participate in the global registry database for Angelman syndrome, and I've listed the website here. The community is also very fortunate right now that there's multiple opportunities for participating in a clinical trial. So it's important to have these conversations with your physicians about the pros and cons of each drug and trial, because today it's still too early to know if all candidates will be successful. We hope so, and that's what we're doing right now, is to find that out. The Angelman clinical trial website is a great resource to learn more about the clinical trial process and also to see what drug trials are available. So I would encourage you to take a look at that, and I've listed that website as well. And finally, stay tuned for future webinars and announcement from Ionis. We'll continue to work with FAST and ASF and bring important information about our program to the Angelman community. So with that, I want to express my sincere appreciation for your time today and for listening to our update. All of us at Ionis are deeply committed to continue our work on behalf of the Angelman community, and we cannot do it without you. So we thank you for your commitment in doing this together. Thank you.